Hey, Cody, good to see you. Close my office door. We got some early birds. Early birds getting worms. Fresh squeezed water from the water machine in the copier room.
Hey, Kevin.
Hey.
How are you?
I'm amazing on a multitude of levels. How are you?
Amazing as well, because I'm joining you from Goose Lake, and it's freaking gorgeous.
Oh, man.
I know. Get out of the office.
I am. I'm just going to stare longingly out the window for a minute.
Are you at least high up in the sky so you can see the beautiful sun and see the city and stuff?
A good solid, I would say, I'm right about 18 feet, 6 inches in the sky. I'm on the second floor, kind of elevated.
That'll do.
That'll do.
But you need to get out. Thank you for doing this, by the way.
No, it's my pleasure. I hope life is treating you abundantly well.
You know what? I really don't have many complaints. I mean, what little complaints I do have are pretty trivial, to be honest. So I can't complain. I mean, other than just like wishing there was, more peace and stability and empathy in the world in general. But here in my little space, no complaints.
World peace. Is that Sveta? Did Sveta just log in?
Yes.
Super Svetters.
Sveta. Oh my gosh.
Oh, we got a couple there's chat boxes going down. There's Cody. Good to be able to make it. My wife is with me and wanted to learn your strategy and use it against you. Man. Flattery gets you everywhere. So excellent. All right, we'll give people a few more minutes. We'll get started on these. We had quite a few people RSVP, so hopefully they got the links. Looks like you guys paid attention to the emails and found your Zoom links effortlessly. So tell me something amazing. Who's got some good news for me? Who's got something? What is the best thing that's happened in the last week for you? You may have something you want to share. Went down to Cooper Landing, did a bunch of mountain biking, hit Crescent Lake Trail. Sveta and I went way back, tore it up, got back to the truck, put the bicycles in the truck, started driving. It just began to rain. So we had a great day of biking and didn't get rained on. Then we hit Powerline Pass last night. That was gorgeous, absolutely stunning. I got flat tire on my bike, but it happened within the last, I'd say 2 miles. So I only had to push my bike about 2 miles to the parking lot, which wasn't too bad. All right, you guys are there. Move some stuff around on my screen, make room. Shibidoo, shibidoo. Oh, where did it go? Oh, that's more better. I was frowning. Thank you, Sandra, for noticing. It's because I was thinking, I was trying to figure out my screen share. So I got these dual monitors, and I'm trying to figure out how I just share like a window on one. And then I'm not necessarily the most tech savvy individual. There are some things I do tremendously well, such as, fix anything, build things, power tools. I can, I can karaoke voraciously. I'm a voracious karaokeer. What else can I do? Tame wild animals. Anyway, guys. All right. So what do we got here? We got just a minute or two. Some more people are logging in there. Oh, Cody is typing something vigorously. So anybody got anything exciting that they want to share with us? Oh, there's Laura. A couple of you popping in here. Anybody, what I love to do is I want to start off with some success stories. I would love to hear what anybody has experienced recently, just a story of winning. Let's see some positive news. Someone tell me something awesome. Not everybody at once. Tell me something amazing.
Hey, Kevin.
Sandra.
I became a real estate agent since I last saw you.
Oh, fantastic. How's the business treating you?
Oh, it's fun. It's really fun. It's busy.
Yes, this is the bread and butter time. This is when you make this is when manna just rains from heaven.
Oh my gosh, yeah. It's just people calling and wanting to buy, and so we buy.
Excellent. What's the best deal that you know of right now?
Well, I'm actually going to put an offer in tonight on a flip. And I would say that's probably the best deal.
There you go.
Yep.
Well, good.
Yep.
Congratulations. That's excellent.
Yeah.
So what are you discovering is your biggest aha from getting your real estate license?
I didn't realize how much work you guys do. I'm usually the buyer.
Jeremiah Benson. I see Jeremiah here. All he does is work on his cabin.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's how come I don't have any pendings too.
But you have a beautiful tan. Look at that tan. Oh my God, you're radiant. You know what you remind me of? If you were just, if your cheekbones were a little, you remind me of like if you were like 6'4", you remind me of like a young Tom Selleck on Magnum PI. He had a little curly hair, had the facial stuff, beautiful tan.
Before I got my COVID cut, I was going for Hugh Jackman off Wolverine.
That's good.
This big side throw going on.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Good times.
All right. Well, we're starting to pack them in here, man. So we're going to get started. So I appreciate all you guys. You guys are fantastic. So what we'll do is we'll start off with a little bit of market information. And so I will tell you, it's been, you would not know that there had been a COVID or a pandemic or crazy sauce in the streets because the real estate market is booming right now. Alaska, more so than almost any other state other than maybe something in the Great Lakes area or something, is highly affected by seasons, okay? just simply because of daylight and, just a lack of vitamin D, as well as just the activities. But right now is basically, a key point. If you're trying to sell a house, you're trying to do some activity, this is great. Very interesting. We saw a lack of inventory hitting during the pandemic. So at one point we had 20% lower activity. A lower inventory than we typically had during the same time, because I'm watching those statistics week over week compared to the year before. It was really astounding to see at one point, at least in the Anchorage area, there was only 720 residential houses. And at the exact same time last year, this was at in about the middle of May, there's normally been around 900. So it was close to a 20% lag in inventory. However, we see that starting to accelerate. We see all those people, we came through it, we survived. Hey, you know what, we're going back to normal, and they're pushing out. We were expecting to see a huge drop off of buyers, but it just didn't happen. I would say that probably only around, and Sveta can vouch as a lending aspect, a few buyers, that were out there had some, delays on employment and had some things, but they're going back. But if you think about most of the individuals who are affected negatively, food servers, different, what you would call non-essential, most of those, forgive me, aren't, a large majority of them were not what you would consider to be residential home buyers. Okay. And so those individuals that make up a bulk of our buying inventory this time of year, actually kept working, stayed employed, plus maybe and if their hours were reduced, they still had extra income. So it's amazing to see how much our market has survived in comparison to other places. I haven't really studied a whole lot in other states to see if there's any other opportunity, any areas of opportunity, but Anchorage and Wasilla seems to be doing really well. Wasilla is just cranking it out. I have a client who's looking for something in the 250, 275. In the last 2 weeks, we've got beat out on multiple offers on 2 properties. So, throw them in an octagon, make them fight. I mean, we came in full price, only asked for like $4,000 in closing costs, something that we thought was trivial, which would be normal in any other market. Come in full price and ask for like $4,000. That's not aggressive on anything as a buyer at all. Only to discover that, hey, within 72 hours to 4 days of that property hitting the market, now there's like 2 or 3 different offers on it. So very interesting. And it's been beautiful out in the valley lately. This year specifically, because we're actually getting some rain. So everything's green, nothing's on fire and burning down. So, and interest rates, as Sveta will tell you, are ridiculously low. Locked another guy at just around 2.75 and a 30-year fixed. That's just stupid. That's just stupid. So if you have any clients, if you guys out there, any of you are real estate professionals, or if you own a property, it'd be really, the refinances are not as attractive if you're non-owner occupied. But if you owner occupy a property, it does not hurt you to ask about a refi, even if you just bought the place 18 months ago, because interest rates are just stupid low right now. And so there's a lot of good opportunity out there. Let's see if Sveta's with us. Let me see if Sveta had anything that she wanted to share regarding what's going on. I see it looks like she dropped off. Her phone probably rang. All right, guys. Hey, are you excited to learn about real estate negotiations?
Yay!
Yay, Amy. Thank you. Okay. So I will tell you.
I'm excited to learn from you though, Kevin, because I know you're the best.
Oh, I'm not, it depends on what day you catch me. Even I get a little, I don't eat lunch and I skip something and my blood sugar gets low and then I get a little feisty. Just had a little heated discussion with another, not a heated discussion, but opposing viewpoints in a negotiation right before we started this. And so it's always helpful, but it's good to remain calm. So we'll go over this. So I'm going to do a share screen real quick as we plow through this. Give me just a second. All right, you should be looking at the Rex logo. All right, let me bring up my chat box here so I can also see if anybody has any questions. Where's my chat box? There's a ham sandwich. There it is. Chat box. All right, so if you guys have any questions or so, you can throw them into the chat box for me as we go through real estate negotiations. So I would say that, this is probably the most critical skill that's not taught in real estate. Okay, there's a couple things that are paramount skills. Negotiating being one of the top handful of things that you have to do. The other one that is also, which is a skill that takes a long time to hone, is not just negotiations, but is pricing properties correctly. That is probably the biggest struggle that most real estate professionals have, is pricing properties correctly so they sell, or so that they don't overestimate the value of it if you're a buyer, or that you don't, and so both of these only come through experience. What I've discovered is most people, who struggle with pricing properties because they don't look at a lot of them, and so they don't know what value is, because these pictures can be so deceiving. But on the same side, on negotiations, not understanding how many different options there are, and really just getting to and understanding your role in any given situation, of what your role is when trying to create value or trying to create an opportunity for yourself in real estate investing. So, all right, so we don't have to do with the Rex. For anybody who's out there, or X, there's our PowerPoint. Oh, what am I going the wrong direction? Yes, I am. I don't even know how to work my arrows. All right, so there we go. There's our mission statement for those who want to know. Okay. So real estate negotiations. Here's what we're going to learn. We're going to learn some negotiating tips, okay? Things to take in consideration. And I want you guys to go ahead and chime up and share some experience that you have. We're going to run through a couple different, I've actually put in a couple different experiences in here, some different things. And so we're going to run through a couple things and discuss how we would negotiate these. Okay, we're going to understand the common points of negotiation. We're going to walk through the process. We're going to identify tactics and counter tactics that you can use in order to negotiate successfully. And then we're going to talk about some books and resources that I have found to be extremely beneficial when it comes to the negotiating process. Okay, so that's what we're going to learn today. Other than this, is there anything that people wanted to learn regarding negotiations? All right. By the way, when we wrap up, if we have extra time and you have a scenario that you want to run through, we can discuss it. Okay. What I like to say is, dude, we are always negotiating. We're always negotiating. Okay. One thing is, you're negotiating with yourself. You probably don't even realize it, but subconsciously you are negotiating with yourself, even on what you're going to have for breakfast. You are weighing, you know what, do I skip breakfast today? How do I feel my energy? What does that look like? Hey, you know what, do I get a coffee and do I go get a piece of lemon bread from Starbucks, or do I not? Like, you are constantly negotiating with yourself, right? And that extends out when we're dealing with clients and we're dealing with other people, is to understand, guys, you must always be professional, right? Don't ever let a negotiation jeopardize your character. It's okay to disagree with someone, and to disagree someone in a big way. And you need to understand that never let that sacrifice your dignity and your professionalism, because your reputation is profound. Inevitably, I've had people that I had negotiations with that didn't go well, but still had a phenomenal relationship, and in the future made something happen somewhere else, just simply because they knew they were dealing with someone who was level-headed, okay? The next thing that you're always going to be negotiating is, other than being professional, always refer back to motivation. And that is, why are we even here? And that means understanding what the true reason behind your motivation is, and the true reason, more importantly, about what the motivation is of the individual whom you're negotiating with. In order for you to really understand what the other individual is thinking, it's very important that in the early steps of negotiation that we listen more than we talk. We're going to talk about, we're going to go into detail about how to pay attention and how to be emotionally present when you're negotiating with someone, okay? And when we say to that, this is very critical. Listen more than you talk. What does that require of you in order to be a successful negotiator?
Patience.
Yeah, it does require patience. In more practical sense, in order for you to listen, what does that require?
You do not talk.
Yeah, and you to actually have a conversation with them. Guys, we rely on too many professionals out there rely on text and emails. But guess what? How do you pick up on vocal cues and nuances? 70% of our communication is both physical and emotional, and the rest is just words. It's just like, you know how people misread a text or misread an email. Sarcasm sometimes comes across as being an asshole. You don't know what that looks like. It's so critical that we actually have conversations with people so you can get to know where their emphasis lies. You can tell when someone's passionate about something. You can tell when somebody's just giving you a dismissal yes. Some people just agree with you so that you quit talking. Have you had that before? It's like, okay, whatever. Right? So it's so critical that if we're in negotiations, particularly if you're negotiating a deal or trying to get your client, or trying to a best deal, or trying to get a deal for yourself, that you actually have a conversation with someone. And what else does having a conversation allow you to do at a profound level that emails and texts cannot do? Yeah, build a relationship, which is critical. Okay. So next, don't be attached, and then finally, don't be attached to the outcome. Guys, it's okay not to win every negotiation. What you will find is the individual who typically wins is the individual who's the most confident in their position. Doesn't even matter if they're right. They can be wrong, but if they're confident in their position and they dig their heels in, well then, you know, typically that's the individual who will win the negotiation. Not always, but it's very important. That's why you can't be attached to the outcome. You just got to realize that, hey, you know what? It doesn't always work out. Sometimes we deal with irrational people and just say, you know what? I really appreciate the opportunity to try to make something happen. And I'm sorry it didn't work out this time. But that's just part of being professional. So these are some of the, just to understand, you're always negotiating. Be professional, know their motivation, listen more than you talk, and don't be attached to the outcome. So here is what we typically come to. When we're talking about real estate and trying to find opportunities, when we're negotiating with a seller or you're negotiating with a buyer, there's really only two things. And of course, the second is all just it's categories. It's price and terms. Okay, but price is only an issue in the absence of value. We're going to discuss this. It's not always the price. See, we think it's all about the price. It's about getting about the most amount of money, but it's really important that we understand that money is just a placeholder for other people's values, okay? So I'm going to stop share for a second so I can talk to you about this because this is really important. Money is just a placeholder for values. Money is a physical manifestation of what you find is important. You invest in money and it's like stored energy. And then whatever is vitally important in your life, that's what you invest your money in. If you want to know the depth of an individual's character or what they're passionate about, take a look at their checkbook and see where they write their checks. How do you know that Sveta and I are voraciously love real estate? Probably 90% of every dollar that we make doesn't go towards fancy vacations and stuff like that. It goes, we put it into our properties. Sveta and I, our money hardly collects dust in our accounts. If we have anything, we're like, how do we fix up our rental units and how do we make whatever we have nicer? You can see that real estate is a manifestation of what we see as value and therefore it just goes through. But I will tell you what, have you ever met a guy who's makes lots of money and he just has lots of toys, right? And he's got four-wheelers and snowmobiles, he's got no assets, but they got lots of stuff sitting in their yard. Collect, well, what is important to him, right? So remember the price and that money is only a concern in the absence of value. Understanding that since the money is that placator, and that's, you know, by the way, money doesn't change people. Money will reveal them though. Money absolutely will reveal you. Okay. Again, you will then invest in those things that are at your disposal. The more money you have, then it's easier for you to get those things in your life that are more important based on your value system. But the first thing is we think price, but I want you to, other than think price, I want you to think, what is the value that they're looking for? Okay. What is it in your life, or what is it where price that you would jeopardize price for something of greater value, right? And what kind of vehicle do you drive? Right? Do you drive a brand new vehicle? It's all fixed up, maybe something bigger than you need. For years, I drove a 3/4 ton truck with a lift on it and stuff, and I had a snow machine trailer. But the truth is, the truck was way bigger than I necessarily needed. It was more of a prestigious symbol for me. Could I have gotten away with a little half-ton or even an SUV? Yeah, absolutely. Okay. However, you buy up because that price no longer the price that you're paid for it because the value of is getting out of this vehicle. It's the same thing in real estate negotiations. You don't understand it. But what happens is if you're a listing licensee and you're dealing with sellers, you need to understand that They're hung up on a price of what they need because they think they need a certain amount of money in order to take it and then go achieve a goal. The trick to finding phenomenal opportunities is find out what that goal is and see if something other than a lump of money, other than a big old stack of money, is there some way you can solve that goal. It's not about the money. It's about the value that they think that money is going to bring to their life. It's really critical as we analyze and you talk to people, but whether they're, or even a buyer, what about that is important to you and why do you want this property, that you understand it's not price, it's what they think that money from that price is going to get them, particularly in a seller's case. And then how do we negotiate that for our benefit, right? And solve their problems. Because again, I don't want you to think of it, you know, it is negotiating, but really you have to be a problem solver and you have to figure out how to creative way to solve their problems, right? So I'm gonna go back to my screen share here and go through these. So let's talk about what some of those, items would be. So other than price, well, the terms. The terms and the things you typically see negotiated in real estate are gonna be closing costs, okay? Now, for those who aren't in real estate, there's two piles of money that it takes to buy real estate. One pile of money is your down payment, and that is a reduction in the principal. So if you're buying a $100,000 property and you're putting 50% down, that's $50,000, and that's one pile of money. The other pile of money is what we refer to as closing costs, right? And the closing costs are maybe everything from appraisal to home inspection to, point reduction, mortgage premium insurance, recording fees, escrow closing fees, attorney doc prep fees. There's so many that comes into closing costs, right? Well, those can be paid by either party, or we may slosh that money around. You may pick up some other costs of sale that are associated with someone, right? And there's some negotiations that can take place, and that's probably in real estate, at least in traditional sales, the most common closing costs. But we can also negotiate the closing date. Why would the closing date be important for someone, right? Give me some scenarios.
If you're
In
trying
my
to skip
experience-
mortgage payments and trying to do the whole 2 months of free rent, essentially.
There you go. So a closing date would be important for somebody who's getting a multifamily. Some other things to consider, closing date is really critical if you're a buyer and you're buying a property, right? Do you know, so since they prorate all your interest, if the seller is paying all your closing costs, you probably want to close closer to the beginning of the month so you get the most bang out of your buck. But if you're the seller's paying all your closing costs and you close at the end of the month, there's only so much that they can cover. So you'll actually probably end up getting a little less. You may ask for more than you need if you're closing at the end of the month with a seller credit. So closing date can be a concern. By the way, if you're a seller, and you have a loan, it's an FHA loan, right? And let's say you have a $400,000 mortgage that you have to pay off and you have an FHA loan, and the buyer wants to close maybe June 29th or July 2nd. Well, it only seems like a couple days. It only seems like 3 or 4 days difference. But did you know that if you're a seller with an FHA loan, they charge you that whole month's worth of interest, whether you close at the beginning of the month or the end? Means that you may think that but you as a seller, just because that buyer pushed that out to that second date, you are paying that full month's worth of interest on your FHA loan, not just the 2 days that you used. So that little day, they push that date out 3 days, but if you got an FHA loan to push off, it may have cost your seller hundreds and hundreds of dollars, okay? Oops. Other things, personal property, right? So there's things that can go into it, right? Now this is typically used personal property, depends on if they're furnished units, you might see that, or what else, really nice appliances, those are considered personal property. In Wasilla, personal property is used huge in the negotiations of recreational property. Hey, it comes with a boat, it comes with a four-wheeler, it comes with whatever it is. You just got to be really careful about how we make that happen, okay? And so that's why do you have to be careful with how you use personal property in a negotiation?
It should be a separate bill of sale, shouldn't it?
Well, it should, and yet somehow it does influence the sale up a little bit. Here's why
For
you
sure.
run into with personal property, particularly in sales. One is, you know, your appraisal can only go up. It's based on the real estate, and you may add value because of personal property, and you may run into appraisal issues. Okay. The second
Oh,
thing
yeah.
is if it's a recreational property like a cabin or something, you got to be really careful with personal property because you can sell a cabin, and particularly if it's on you know, a lot of cabins are sold on seller financing or whatever it is. And then what happens if the guy just takes all the personal property out of it and hands the property back? Doesn't make his payments. Well, you get the property back, but you missed a bunch of personal property. I saw this happen on a purchase once. A buyer early occupied a property. This was out in Wasilla. It was a traditional sell. Buyer early occupied about a week and a half before recording, and then their loan fell apart, and they ended up moving out of the property. And when they moved out, they took a bunch of the stuff with it that was in the listing. Took the lawnmower, took a couch, took a TV, took some stuff that was supposed to be on a bill of sale, but when they defaulted, they just took all that stuff with them. Right? So you got to be careful with personal property. It can be really good, just depends on it. But, you know, another thing that we negotiate, earnest money, okay? The size of the deposit, be it small or large. How can earnest money positively or negatively affect your offer? If you got two identical offers, but there's a difference in earnest money deposit, how does that help or hinder?
If the deal falls through and the seller's supposed to keep the earnest money, that makes a big difference to them.
Yeah, it can. You know, it's really hard to keep earnest money in this state for a seller. There's so many little holes that a buyer can use to get out. It's almost ridiculous. Okay, it really, really is absurd. If you guys ever want to talk contract law, or you ever want to do a Rex member on purchase and sell agreements, I'm happy to do one. As broker and as teacher over here at Real Estate Brokers of Alaska, I will tell you there's people been in the business 15, 20 years. I don't know if you guys are aware of how many changes have been made to the purchase and sell agreement, but most people don't know. For instance, on the MLS purchase and sell agreement, did you know that if your lead-based paint addendum is not signed and executed prior to the purchase and sell agreement, the purchase and sell agreement is non-enforceable? You have to have that buyer acknowledge a lead-based paint addendum for a property built before 1978. Otherwise, page 6, paragraph 12, it is not a valid purchase and sell agreement. It's not enforceable. So there's things you got to look out for. If you're a seller and you think your earnest money is secure, it may not be. You got to read your contracts. Also, earnest money, right? What is a seller? What fees may a seller have out of pocket in order to make a deal happen? What might a seller pay for in order to keep a deal together?
But well, it's maybe the septic was bad, well, things like that.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Jeremiah. So it's going to be your well, your septic, maybe the appraisal, homeowners, a resale certificate, negotiated repairs, carpet replacement. Like there's a lot of things. And the more the seller is sticking his neck out, he has to look at that earnest money and say, is it enough? Oftentimes on a VA loan that's 000, you can have somebody who has phenomenal credit, but really they're walking into a property with zero money out of pocket. They're probably going to get their earnest money back at closing. So if you have a buyer who's doing a VA loan, well, that's great because VA loans are fantastic. You know, they got low credit score. They're very forgiving, and very few of them DFT, like fall apart. Occasionally they do, but they have such amazing underwriting, such good insurance. Normally you can take that loan and farm it up to another lender and find somebody to close it. However, if a buyer's only putting $500 worth of earnest money down, is that no? An appraisal is $800 right out of the gate. Then if you're doing a well and septic, there could be another 1,000 or who knows how much it is, right? And then if you're doing repairs, and then let's say in the case it's a resale certificate, and you got anywhere from $200 to $300. Listen, that seller, there's no way that if that buyer defaults, he can be made whole. Appraisals aren't transferable between most lenders. Rarely are they. Okay. Your resale certificate, that's only good for like 90 days and they need to do minutes. They're going to charge you money, right? So all these things that can happen. So when you're looking at earnest money, one of the things is you extend that. Other things that you can use in earnest money is I'm going to put earnest money up, but I tell you what, I'll pay for the appraisal. I'll pay for the resale certificate. I get paid back at closing. Now you can use that. That's to this buyer. It's like it's a zero-sum game. I mean, I get paid back at recording, but for the seller, maybe the reason they're selling is because they're tight on money and they're struggling to make payments on a vacant house. And the difference between two identical offers is, hey, listen, the net may be the same, but one buyer who's willing to put up a little bit more earnest money and pay the upfront cost for the seller and get reimbursed at closing, he's going to get that offer because that seller's in a tight spot. So these are all different things and different tactics that we use in closing costs in order to negotiate wins for yourself and your clients. And finally, the last thing here is, as I go back to my screen share, is going to be repairs. Okay, and so repairs are huge. Now, if you think that you're you do understand, at least in our, and I see this a lot, that a buyer gets a list of repairs and they think that this is their laundry list and this is their time to go shopping and ask for everything in the world. Okay? So there's a couple different ways that when you negotiate a contract that we can prevent these repairs from getting out of hand. If you represent the seller or this is your property, one is to limit the repairs to health and life safety issues only. And home inspection is typically broken down to 4 different categories: health and life safety, significant, recommended repairs, and maintenance items. Okay, so 4 different categories. Some of them only have 3, but typically the 3 to 4 different categories. Say, hey, listen, I'm only doing the health and life safety. Additionally, I will tell you, because I've bought and sold real estate in other states, that in other states like Arizona and Colorado, they actually put a limit. They will say repairs to be limited to only health and life safety, and total repairs shall not exceed a value of $3,000. So then have you ever run into a situation in a contract where a seller agrees to have the seating system inspected and all recommended repairs made? Well, you're agreeing to something before you even know what the price tag is. You should be very cautious about ever doing that. You should say, hey, listen, upon review and approval, seller may agree, right? Or you may, but never agree to a repair that doesn't have a price tag on it if you don't know what it is. Okay? Get some bids or allow yourself. Or put a cap in it. I will pay up to, right? And that way, hey, listen, buyer, you want all these health and life safety issues? That's fine. But I told you only $3,000. It's going to cost $4,200. Are you ready to cough up $1,200? Right? And we can do that a couple different ways. I can reduce your closing costs. I could do that. So, but these are typically the most common areas that all go into a contract. Is there anything else other than closing costs, closing date, personal property, earnest money, and repairs that you can think of that might be that's something that might be negotiated? I can't. That's the only 5 I came up with. It's not that they're the only 5. That was the ones that had me scratching my head. All right. Oops. All right. So let's talk about a scenario. Let's exercise this. You guys ready? Let's do some brain. Let's think about this. An investor identifies a home in a neighborhood known to have exceptional rental and resale value. So pick your neighborhood. This property is in an awesome freaking area. The home seems priced really, really well. It's only $225,000. Now the goal is to keep the payments as low as possible to create cash flow, right? He just wants to keep his payments low. There's signs that the roof is at the end of its life. Now the investor wants to write an offer of $199 because there's roof, but he knows that there's other people interested in the property. Okay? So you guys got it? Property's listed for $225. There's people interested in it. There's signs that the roof has issue. He wants to keep his payments as low as possible. What options and what offers might he entertain? And how would you might negotiate with that seller?
I would get a bid for whatever the roof might take to fix, to, if I'm the buyer, to the investor, to further, basically bulk up that why I'm lowballing them.
Okay, so you would want to get evidence by an inspection report, the condition of the roof.
Yes, and then if it actually is, I'd get a roofer to give me a quick estimate, to make sure that if I'm putting in $199, that's, I can say, hey, I'm bidding $199, but the roof is going to cost me $20,000 anyways, and I'm just throwing it out there. So really, I'm not lowballing you that much.
Yeah. Okay, so what is something you would want to know that doesn't show up in this scenario? What's the first critical piece of information that we need?
Does the seller or the buyer have any cash?
That's one. I mean, that is an important thing to note. Who's got money?
It's the most important thing to the seller.
That's right. The motivation. What is the seller after? Why are you selling? What's important to you? Hey, Mr. Seller, I know you're asking $225 for this property. Can I ask why you're selling and where are you going? And what's the most important thing that can happen in this transaction to create a win for you? Remember I said it's not about the price. It's about what he thinks that price is going to do for you. What is the risk that the seller has at a house with $225 with a roof at the end of its life expectancy?
That it's going to sit or it's going to fail on him while he still owns it.
Yeah, that or a buyer pays him his $225, gets a home inspection and still beats him up over the repairs and then turns the home inspection repair over to the appraiser. So the guy has an appraisal that's subject to conditions that he's paid for. Now he's just that's not a good situation for him. So you find out what's important to the seller. And if you want to come in low, what would be the benefit of a low offer to the seller? Even if it's not what he's asking for, under what terms might a seller appreciate a $199 offer?
That he doesn't have to deal with that roof at all.
There you go. Not only am I not going to, you know what, I'm going to take on the roof. I just want to have it inspected and make sure there's nothing structural. Additionally, I will limit any repairs to health and life safety, or I may not ask for any repairs. I may just go get a home inspection and just verify the condition of the property, and provided there's nothing that's going to come back in appraisal, I'll buy it as is. No inspection will go to the appraiser, and we'll just move forward. Okay? After all, what's the most important thing to the investor? Low price. Right?
Yep.
It's in a great rental area. And by the way, if a house, if the roof is at the end of its life expectancy, okay, can you still rent out a house even though the roof only has 2 or 3 years left on it?
Absolutely.
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 He may look at this deal and say, listen, I know that I'm getting a smoking deal on this house and I'm going to make so much cash flow that in 18 months I will have paid for that roof. Right? So again, it's understanding what is the motivation of the seller and how do we create this, how do we create a situation that's a win for the seller? And hey, listen, if I buy it as and it's not subject to repairs and everything, that means that we can get in there. I can do what's called a non-documented inspection. Okay. Do you guys know what a non-documented inspection is? Okay. If you're not asking for any repairs, you can call any home inspector. Most of them will do it and say, I just want to get a non-documented inspection. It's like $150. They go through the property and you walk behind them with a notepad and they point out stuff and you write it down. But when they leave, there's no report. You, based on them and walking through, you get a feel if this property is worth your time or not. The great thing from a seller is there's no documentation about anything that's been said between you and the home inspector. So there's no disclosure on his residential property disclosure statement. He's not screwed for the next guy. So he loves that.
Would you bother doing a, having your buyer sign a waiver of right to inspect?
Absolutely, I do. Yep. There's no generated report. So you do a waiver of right to inspect and you do everything that, just make sure that they're aware of it. They technically are inspecting the property. They just don't walk away with any kind of documentation or warranty. So, But I would definitely just cover your butt and have a waiver. You're absolutely right. But there's different ways. From the seller standpoint, that's great because I have a buyer now who's coming in. He's going to get a non-documented inspection, which he can do the same time as as the appraisal. And maybe that buyer says, you know what, I'm going to fund the appraisal at closing. I mean, not at closing, right out of the gate. I'm going to pay, we're going to get pended. I'm going to fund that appraisal right away. And that way I just cut off 2 to 3 weeks on the closing time. And depending on where that seller needs to be. So again, these are all these little, remember, we're playing chess here. And the most important thing we need to know is what is important to the seller? Why are you selling? And how do I create a transaction that solves all your problems, but at the same time creates an opportunity for me? All right. So those are some different ways that we would analyze that situation. Is it possible that this guy, the seller, is just stuck on his price and doesn't want to negotiate? Yes. Is it okay when the guy says, hey, listen, the numbers, the cash flow, and you walk away? Yes, that's okay. But again, these are just different ways of scenarios and things to take into consideration. Okay. Remember, it's price is only an issue in the absence of value. Quit thinking about price and start thinking about what the value is of the offer that you're bringing. All right, oops. All right, let's see what we got here. There's a scenario. Let me go back to a screen share. Boom, screen share. Super Ninja, screen share. Boom. All right, so next one here. Is that presenting offer? Is that the right one? All right, so when presenting your offer, you analyze a property. First, call whoever it is that you want to talk to. Guys, a lot of real estate professionals are bad about this and they deserve to have their hands slapped, okay? Do not just email or text or send somebody, I'm sending you an offer. The most critical thing you can do to assure that you're getting a great value for you, your client, or whoever it is you got to call whoever's the licensee if there's one, or talk directly to the seller and just find out what's going on. Why are you selling it? Hey, what's more important to them? Selling for the most amount of money or selling quickly with no resistance, right? Don't reply upon email and text. Call the other individual. You would be really surprised what people will give up when they're having a great conversation with someone that they like, okay? You'd be profoundly impressed with what people will tell you, particularly a lot of real estate professionals because they're naturally just always so gregarious. There's a couple out there that you have trouble. They'll tell you everything on the earth. They'll tell you the blood type of their client, right? So like, give them a chance. Sit there and be quiet. Okay. We say it's called let silence do the heavy lifting. So what is the most important thing for your client? This is how this plays out, right? Jeremiah, is your you want to do can you do a role play with me real quick? Maybe you want to turn your mic on? I'm gonna unmute you.
Well, so are you voluntelling me?
I am voluntelling you. It's like
Okay.
it's that tan that you got. I want you to imagine that you got a seller and you got a listing. Maybe it's one you have on the market right now. And I'm calling you as an individual. I just want to ask you a question real quick. Hey, Jeremiah, I just noticed your property you have over there in Outrigger, and that's a really great property. Hey, do you mind if I just ask you a couple questions?
Sure.
Can I ask why your seller is selling?
I'm going to be honest with you, Kevin, this home's a rental currently. You probably should know that anyway. And, he's had a good run, and they're moving to Arizona, and they're looking to make a move.
A good run, huh?
Sure.
So how soon do they want to be in Arizona?
Well, they got a few things to button up here. They own the place outright. There are no rush to sell.
Really?
Preferably in about 45 days.
When they sell it, what do they intend on doing with their equity since they own it free and clear?
Well, I don't know. I've had this conversation with them multiple times. First, they're going to go to Vegas, put it on black, which I didn't believe. I'm like, you're crazy. And then the second answer was they're going to buy a place in Lake Havasu and just party for the next 5 years. Whatever.
More important to them, selling quickly so they can be in Lake Havasu, or just getting the most amount of money so they can bet on black?
Like I said, they own it outright, so they're in no rush to sell. They're looking to get the most amount of money as possible.
All right, I appreciate that. Thanks, Jeremiah. All right, thank you. So here's what I would say when I hear that. They want the most amount of money. So it's not price, it's terms. That might be even something that you might offer them a short-term seller finance with a big money down, because they're going to make more money than if they sold it outright, right? And so there's a couple different things that you can work on that offer with and just understanding their motivation. The other thing is that now that I know where they want to be, and perhaps we know how quickly they want to be there, maybe there's other things. If it's a rental, okay, if it was their primary residence and I knew they were leaving state, what other things could I negotiate perhaps on my benefit or the benefit of my client? Personal property. They're moving. There's a bunch of stuff they may not want.
Yeah. I was going to say garage sale. Yep.
Right? So there's so many things that are important, all right? It's a rental property. What else, if they're trying to sell a rental property, what challenges might they be running into with the fact that it's rented?
Lease agreement time frame.
There you go. That's exactly right. Hey, my client needs to move in right away, but when do those leases expire? And if they're expiring and they don't expire for 6 months, can you still buy it if you want to own or occupy? Absolutely, you can. You just need a reason and a date. You guys, a lot of you think that you have to move in right away with an owner-occupied loan, but in most cases you don't. You just have to present the lender a date on when you intend to move in and a reason why you can't move in right away. Can that be a benefit to the buyer? Okay, and how can you use that to benefit your buyer?
He can collect those rents while somebody else is living in there.
That's exactly right. He has to move in right away. He can make cash flow for 6 months until that lease expires and moves in. Meanwhile, he's staying on his brother's couch or something, right? Meanwhile, still buy it with an owner-occupied loan and recover a ton of his down payment before he has to occupy the property. Then he occupies the property. How long do you have to live in it before you can buy another property?
A year.
Yeah, but what does the year start? Is it the move-in date or the recording date?
Recording.
Recording date. So there's a bunch of different ways that you can, and meanwhile, you can position it for your buyer and say, hey, listen, seller, you know, you've got this guy in here and, you know, my buyer really wants to live in this property. He does, just not right away. And, you know, with the fact that you've got a tenant, it kind of diminishes the value. Since my guy has to stay on his couch, you know, we're probably going to come in $10,000 or $12,000 low because he's got to find somewhere to stay for 6 months until he can move in. Right? So you can use all these different things. And the only way you know this is that you talk to the other individual, find out the motivation, find out what's going on. Ask them a question, and then sometimes you just get real quiet because people get annoyed by silence and they'll start giving up more information. Okay? So call them, don't rely on emails and text. 2, pay attention to nonverbal cues. What is a nonverbal cue?
If you're in person, yeah.
Yeah, go ahead. Who was Sandra? Was that you talking?
I was going to say body language also.
Yeah, so there you go. So if you're talking to somebody in person, which is ideal, what are some nonverbal cues that tell you whether or not they're receptive or not?
They cross their arms.
Yeah, they cross their arms. Maybe they even turn away from you slightly, right? Giving you a little bit of a shoulder and cross their arms.
Look away.
Yeah, avoid eye contact, look down at the ground and kind of like bite their lip.
On the phone, they'll take a deep breath.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So just pay attention to those things that are stressing her. What you're looking for is you're looking for those things that cause stress. Why is it important to know what's causing the other party the most amount of stress?
Use it for negotiation.
What is it? Okay, so there's 2 forces in life that motivate us to make all decisions. What are they?
Pain and pleasure.
There you go. What do we spend 90% of our life doing?
Avoiding pain.
Boom, there you go. Avoiding pain. That's why you drive the same way to work. That's why even though that's why your closet is full of clothes, but you only wear 10% of them. You got your comfort zone. That's why you develop a pattern. That's why, you know, there's so many different places you can go out to eat, but you and your wife or your loved ones probably go to the same 2 or 3 repetitively, right? We know we like it. We like that consistent, and yet the world is completely just chaos. And for whatever reason, we're constantly looking for how do we avoid pain, and we seek out consistency. Well, the individual on the other side is the same way. So it's important for us, and we're going to talk a little bit here about an exercise you can do to identify pain and having a discussion with them with 4 key questions. But pay attention to nonverbal cues. Keep quiet when you present your offer. You'd be really surprised if they just sit there and mill about it. But I think a lot of people, when they present an offer that may be what they consider to be less than attractive, they almost talk the client out of it. Like, you guys, I can't tell you how many times I've seen realtors do this. Hey, you know, they ask, they don't get, we're expecting a counter. When you say I'm expecting a counter, do you know what that tells me? You're willing to pay more. Shut up and just present your offer. And go, we analyzed it, and based on the comps, this is our offer. We felt this is the best, we feel this is the best way to present it. And then just shut up. But if you're saying, hey, you know what, this is, you know, I expected a counter from you. Yeah, maybe you are. But you basically just showed your cards that you're willing to pay more. Okay. Or vice versa, the other direction. Or, hey, we're willing to do this. Guys, just be very quiet, be very cautious, and just keep quiet. Next. It says listing. It's supposed to be listen. Listen to what's important to the other party. Again, ask them, why are you selling? hey, listen, when you sell this property, where are you moving to? What are you like? Remember that their only reason that they're selling a property, only reason, we just said there's only 2 reasons that people make a decision. That means they're selling this property to do what? Avoid pain. Or the buyer's buying a property in order to avoid the pain of whatever it is, living in a basement, in their parents' basement, and they're married with kids or they're crossed out. So find out what's important. Find out what the pain is they're moving away from. And that's going to be critical, so that you can then you know which way you need to craft your offer, or how you need to communicate with them. Always stay calm. Okay? They may be insulted. They may get upset with it and say, I completely understand, but you know what? This is based on the circumstances, this is the best we can do. But I completely appreciate your position, right? Just be calm. Also be a problem solver. If they come to you with problems, look for ways, and just don't get emotionally involved in the outcome. Just say, okay, well, this is the best line I've found in all my years of negotiating. I really appreciate you bringing that to my attention. What does everybody just want in an argument? What do people want?
Validation.
Validation. They want to be heard. They want to be appreciated. So when you just say, you know what, I really appreciate you bringing that to my attention. I hadn't thought about it that way. But thank you for sharing. Did I say I agree with you? No. But that individual feels validated and they feel listened to. And sometimes that in and of itself will just go a long way towards helping them say, okay, well, maybe they're thinking internally, well, maybe I'm being a little irrational, and maybe I'm getting a little hot. Okay? Be confident, give your offer the best chance, okay? Don't disparage your offer, whatever it is. If you're coming in, just say, hey, you know what, this is what it is. And if they say, well, I want this, I respect that, but you understand I can't do that. I can't, I can't, that's not in the client's best financial decision to do that. So you know what, just think about it and let us know how you want to reply. And then ask what and how questions. So what are some what and how questions you would ask a seller in a negotiation?
What will make this process easiest for you?
There you go. Right? How will selling this property help you obtain or reach your next goals? Right? What will you do if your property doesn't sell in the next month, 2 months, 6 months? How will you overcome, and what are your, how do you think that you're going to move to Arizona if your house doesn't sell in the next 6 months? Do you see that as happening? And so you get them to think, those how and what questions get them thinking about the consequences of their actions. A lot of times we get this is what's amazing. So I want you to imagine this, okay? I want you to imagine that you're in Wasilla, okay? And you need to be in Fairbanks, okay, in 24 hours. And in Fairbanks is a briefcase with $500,000 in it if you can get there in 24 hours, okay? And so what's the first thing you're going to do? What's the first way you're going to get to Fairbanks?
Call my buddies with airplanes
There you go.
and
fly.
meet them.
And you got a call, and your buddy calls, and your buddy lands, and then guess what? It gets sopped in, and the wind is horrible. It's a Denali, and you can't see it. What are you going to do next?
I'll figure it out.
All right, you're going to figure it out. You're going to start driving north, and the highway's shut down. Listen, if you have to, you will drive south and go through Glen Allen, cut through Delta. Like one way or another, you'll get there. And why is that? Because you are fixated on the goal. You are fixated on what the decision is and where you need to be and why that's important. Now, it's really easy when we say it's $500,000, but oftentimes what happens is our clients get so distracted by traffic and road and noise and life in general, they forget why they're doing something. And they're in a transaction and they get to a roadblock and it's something stupid like a home warranty or who knows what's something ridiculous. And the problem is they're like a guy who knows he needs to be in Fairbanks, but for whatever reason he forgot. And if you don't know where you're going and you get in road construction, what do? You bitch about road construction, but don't make any effort to find an alternate way. Just sit there, roll down the window, this sucks, whatever, complain and make everybody else's life in the car miserable when there's more than one way to get there, right? So when you're negotiating with people or when you're helping, you're coaching. I always say that we're like, as real estate licensees, we need to be more like coaches than we are salespeople, because our job is to help people reach their goals. Well, I'm here to coach you on your own potential, on how you're going to realize where you need to be. And that's not a salesperson, right? That's a confidant. That's a, it's even, I think it's even a greater role than someone would say a consultant, because a coach helps you obtain it helps you reach your greatest potential. But oftentimes you run into that and that's why it's important to ask how and what questions, because then we get them focused on the goal. And it's important that you keep reiterating what that goal is. So in the case of Jeremiah, where he said his client wanted to be in Arizona, go, okay, well, Jeremiah, we brought an offer. It is a little bit less, but I do want to note that this does have your client in Arizona, or does have your client in Las Vegas, at the blackjack tables within 35 days. And would you do me a favor and just ask them, say, hey, I know this offer isn't where you want it to be, but it does have you in Las Vegas in 30 days. How valuable is that to you? Could you pose that question for me when you talk to me? Right? And so now we're going back on motivation. And that's so critical, because oftentimes when we just spit it out in text and emails, again, we've taken all your complete advantage in negotiations is building rapport. Number one is motivation. Number two is rapport. And when you just send emails and texts and don't call the other individual, you are sacrificing your best interest of not just you, but your clients. So let's go back to a share screen here. Okay. Next. All right, here's a scenario. You guys ready to do another one? Here's a scenario. So a buyer finds a fully vacant triplex with outdated units. It's offered for sale. Okay, it's vacant triplex. It's listed for $275,000. It's going to require updating, new flooring, paint, just to get it rented. The paint smells like, the paint is all nasty, and the carpet smells like pets and cat pee. Now, 3 offers have been made, and all were below the asking price, and the seller rejected them. Now, you want to close in the shortest amount of time possible. It has decent appliances. It's got at least the appliances are nice, so you're just doing paint and carpet, and you'd like them to stay with the property. Here's the seller's position. Seller says this property has been a great investment for years. Heck, it makes money. He has very little. Now, the seller is on the fence about fixing it up and just selling it, right? And it should have said the seller. It says you, but he's on the fence. He's half considering just replacing, doing the carpet and paint and doing it himself, but he doesn't have time. And although he's not poor, the money's a little tight because, carpet and paint and everything in 3 units is expensive. And the seller, he feels the price is extremely fair. The building has very little debt, so he's not desperate to sell it. And he's closer to retirement, so the thought of keeping it for rental income, or at least having some consistent income, is nice, but the thoughts of tenants is kind of a pain in the ass, right? Now, you intend to use some of the money or some of the appliances to furnish your daughter's new home. Maybe she just went through a divorce or something, but you want the appliances. But you're willing to stand your ground on price. Okay? So first, let's think about it from a buyer's end. You guys take a second just to think about this scenario, wrap your head around it. And as a buyer, let's start with the buyer first. What might we approach the seller with, and what are some options for purchasing this property? So as a buyer, what is the most important question you can ask of the seller?
So I guess a question is it seems as if they own this outright, that changes a lot of it. So does the
very
seller...
little debt. He doesn't own outright, but he owns very little debt. First thing is the buyer. What again was the very first thing we need to know about the seller?
Most important.
We need to know what their motivation is. What can we derive from that paragraph? Let's identify what's motivating to the seller. What's the very last sentence?
Oh, I think
Right.
it's that the building's empty.
It could be because it's costing him money, isn't it?
Yeah.
But he's less inclined. He's got little debt. And so he's like, he's stubborn. Look at that last sentence. Willing to stand your ground on the price.
So we can talk about terms then.
Boom. If he's not willing to negotiate price, then all our negotiation is going to be on terms, right? So now we're
Yeah.
willing, this opens things up. All right. So
Really?
what are some terms we would negotiate with the seller to make it attractive?
Past the close.
Okay, quick close. Did you say a fast close, Patrick?
Yeah, it's a quick close. He can keep his appliances. Those seem like they're important, but I mean, there's a couple ways you can go about it, but
Yeah, but the buyer wants the buyer says he has decent appliances. He'd like them to stay. So if you're the buyer and you want them to stay, how else can we tweak the terms? Is there anything we can do? And how do we negotiate with the seller? Right?
I would ask him to owner finance the thing.
There you go. Maybe a short-term owner finance and you fix up
Yeah.
the units, right? Increase the value.
Yeah, give me time to fix up the units and make some rent on it.
There you go. And if you wanted the appliances, okay, if you wanted the appliances and you wanted him to acquiesce on them, knowing that he sticks to his price, how would you, remember, price is only condition, how would you articulate what is the value to the seller of letting the appliances stay?
The seller wants the appliances?
Yeah, you see that right down there. You see right down, it's
Oh, okay. I'm not
you
even.
intend to,
reading it.
you intend to sell, you the seller, intend to use some of the appliances to furnish your daughter's new home, but you're willing to stand your ground on price. So here's my thought. If that were the seller and he intends to use the appliances, I would say, Mr. Seller, you know what? I love the idea that you want to have new appliances for you want to have some great appliances for your daughter. But you know what? I think your daughter deserves new appliances, not used ones that came out of a rental. Would you agree?
Yeah.
Excellent. So I tell you what, I'm going to give you your price and we're going to do it. And by the way, if I were to put a 10% down, or if I were to put a reasonable down payment, okay?
You owner finance it.
Do you think you own or finance it? Do you think for the short duration that you own or finance, I put that money down and you're getting your price and you'll get your payoff here as soon as I fix it up and refinance it? Do you think that some of that money would actually be better spent on buying your daughter some nice new appliances instead of used ones out of a rental? Right? Now we've got him thinking about what is the value. Okay, well, gosh, it's for his daughter's new home. He wants to do something nice for his daughter. This goes into motivation. You know what, Mr. Seller? I've often discovered in my experience that when people move appliances in and out, they inevitably get beat up and dinged. I would hate for your daughter to get some used, beat up appliances out of a rental that may not work for the next 6 months. So I tell you what, how about we leave them where they're at because they're working and they won't get scratched up. And we just, if you're willing to do a seller finance on me, this will put you in a position to getting enough money now to put all new appliances in your daughter's house, as well as getting your money. And you said it's you're getting closer to retirement. So maybe these consistent interest payments would be really nice because it gets you consistent income. You end up making more money than if you would sell the property as is for full price. Does that sound like something that would be attractive to you?
Would you maybe cut the asking price and show how he is going to recoup his money through the interest payments?
Yeah, you absolutely would. And just say, here's what it is and here's how you're going to make it up. And you know what? When I refinance it, at payoff, when I refinance it, I'll pay an extra $2,000 or, sometimes I do that. I've done that where I've done zero down seller financing with a balloon payment on my refinance. Because it's a lot easier to come up with the money once the property's all fixed up and nice, but I want as much money up front. So I might actually give you more money. Like, heck, let's say that say the property is for $275 now as is tired, but would I pay $280 for it if I can get in for zero down? Oh, hell yeah. I tell you what, give me $280 seller financing interest only for a year. I'll go in and fix it up. And then when I refinance at the end of the year, I'll give you a $5,000 payoff. We'll take your $5,000. We'll record it against the property as a lien, right? And then why do you need to take that $5,000 and apply it towards the property as a lien? Because then when you purchased it, because now it's debt that was used to purchase the property, it's recorded as a lien. It is not a cash out refinance. Otherwise, if you want to refinance it and it's not secured as a lien and you want to pay $5,000 to give them, that's considered a cash out refinance. And that's going to get you 1.5 points extra on interest rate just for that $5,000. So there's different ways that we'll go into more advanced lending strategies later. But the point is, this is great. Listen, if we just know what's important to the seller, then now my job is not just to get the property. I need to solve the seller's problems, and I can sell them on multiple fronts. Give him the price that he wants. I can create some short-term income for his retirement, which is just like owning the property, but not having to deal with tenants. He doesn't have to fix anything if it breaks, right? And then additionally, he's going to be in a position where he can buy his daughter new appliances, and in the same time, in the buyer, I'm able to walk into this property, perhaps with little to no, with less money up front I would need to than if I were to put 20% down, particularly if I don't intend on doing an owner occupancy. If I don't intend on owner occupying, I'm looking at 25% down, seller finance, I can get in a lot less than that. Save that money for my repairs and refinance it on the backside. So these are different scenarios that as we approach things, it's so critical. By the way, if we don't know what's important to the seller, we can't make any of this work. You can't. It doesn't work if you don't know what the seller's thinking, right? So anything else? You guys have any other thoughts on this scenario, or what are your ahas? What do you guys walk away with? What did you learn?
I've always kind of tried to be creative with offers and stuff like that. I like how you say, find the seller's motivation. Because you never, and just pinpoint it like that.
I think it's really critical that there's a couple different personality characteristics in order to successfully negotiate contracts. There's a couple things that you need to make sure are really critical. One, that you're curious and you're just there to learn. You're totally out of judgment. I'm just here to try to figure out what's important to you. And hey, if I can solve your problems and create an opportunity, then let's discuss what that looks like. Okay. So one, you have to be curious. Two, you have to be sincere. And I've often found, to be perfectly honest with you, that when I just tell it and I lay it on the table and you're just 100% honest with what this person and say, and you learn this, we're going to talk about these books, but just call it out. Is there ever a time, have you ever been in negotiation where you guys know that there's an issue, but it seems almost as if either party's just afraid to verbalize it? Okay. So let's say that I approach this seller and there's no real estate guys involved, and I'm sitting in his driveway and I'm talking to him. Okay. And I'm just talking about this property, and I'm telling him to do a seller finance to him. Okay. What do you think his concern would be with someone he's only maybe met and only been talking to 2 or 3 times, coming to him with a seller finance deal? What do you think his concerns would be?
That his agent doesn't know what he's talking about.
Well, not just, let's say there's no realtors in the way to muddy the waters. This is just arm's length sell. You found a guy. Like, if I'm going to basically I'm lending you money. What would be the concern of a seller if I'm lending some guy money to buy my house, buy my property? What's that?
Default. This doesn't know anything about them.
Boom. So then you may not want to bring it up, but I think that's the most critical. Mr. Seller, you know what? You don't, listen, I understand that you just want to sell this property, but you don't want me to default on it, do you? I mean, right? What is he going to say? No. Guys, it's so powerful that you allow people to say no. You ever seen that book, Get to Yes? It's bullcrap. There's no power in yes. In fact, every time someone agrees with you, they acquiesce, and you may not realize this, but they're building a wall. You ever got a cold call guy on the phone and he's like, hey, do you want more leads? Do you want this? Hey, do you want to be number 1 on this? They're just wanting you to say yes, yes, yes. It's garbage, right? So you need to allow people, and you need to learn how to ask questions that allow them to say no, because no is an empowering stance. It makes them feel confident because they're telling you no. And say, listen, you don't want someone to get in this property and you carry the note and then default, do you? No. And you don't want to take this property back with repairs halfway done and end up with a property in worse condition before, right? No. Well, great. I agree. That's definitely not what I want as well. So let's talk about some ways that we can resolve your concerns, right? How about if I make sure that I have proper insurance? If I have proper insurance on the property, okay, and you knew that you were protected for the full value of it, can you see where that would be beneficial, just like mortgage insurance, right? And so you start having conversations. Allow that individual to say no, and oftentimes just call out, what is your concern? What do you think is the worst thing? Mr. Seller, what is your fear, and what do you think is the worst thing that can go wrong? I want to make sure that I understand your position. And when he tells you, well, you're going to take it, you know what? I completely understand that. I respect that. So what are some ways that we can do this so that you know? How about this? How about if I provide you monthly updates with photographs on how the remodel is going, along with having the property insured? Okay. I had a situation once where the guy was I sold a business. Okay. We sold this business, and the guy selling the business was like 78 years old, and he knew everything about this business. The buyer was a younger kid who had all the energy and knowledge and welding, and he knew everything, but all the information on how to get it and all the connections were with the seller, right? So what is the risk to the buyer of giving this guy $500,000 for a business that's mostly intellectual property on a guy that's 78 years old? What happens if the guy who's 78 dies? What if he dies 18 months into this 5-year buyout? This buyer's screwed. Most of the business value was in the knowledge and wisdom that this gentleman contained in his decades and decades in the aviation business. And this young guy who's starting off, he's going to lose it. This guy dies, he's screwed. So how do you protect against that? Life insurance. Just go get a term life insurance policy and just factor it in. Have the buyer even pay for it as part of his seller finance buyout, and just buy out and just say, hey, listen, there's a risk. So if you pass away in the next 5 years, I'm indemnified. It's a $1.5 million term life insurance policy. It's $200 a month, but I tell you what, that assures that if anything happens, and you have to be able to identify what is the biggest fear that you have, right? And oftentimes if you just call it straightforward, then people say, okay. They'll have a lot more respect for you if you just say, what is the worst thing that can happen and how do we deal with it right now? Okay? Because all the rest is just BS. Right? So let me go back to a screen share here. Okay. So there's 2 great books that I would highly recommend. Okay? These 2 great books. One is Fierce Conversations. It's Never Split the Difference. Is anybody familiar with these 2 books? Okay. Fierce Conversations isn't fierce like heated. It's fierce as in they're meaningful. We're getting to the point, and we are directly handling things that could later, if not handled, can be very contentious. Okay. So it's making sure that you have conversations that matter. And it says achieving success, work, and life, 1 conversation at a time. The whole book says your success or failure in all the relationships in your life happen 1 conversation at a time. If you were ever in a relationship that fell apart, it probably started off great. And then over time, either conversations that needed to take place didn't, until finally it was past the point of no return. Or perhaps in your business, there's some blind spots. There's some things you need to do and you need to address if you're going to but you're not having those conversations with either you or your team, and then therefore your success or failure, the failure's coming, and it happens gradually and then suddenly. So Fierce Conversation is really good because it helps you interrogate reality and make sure that you're having those conversations that need to happen. The next one is Never Split the Difference, which is actually Chris Voss is the head hostage negotiator for the FBI for years. And he talks about FBI contract negotiating and how to build rapport with people. And the same thing, how to ask effective questions, but to do it in a way that's basically, is coming from one of compassion and understanding. This guy negotiated with terrorists. He negotiated with, Muslim extremists and guerrillas in the Congo who had taken people hostage. And if you ever have a chance, you absolutely should get the audiobook, Never Split the Difference. It is spectacular. They're both good. I prefer Never Split the Difference, but Fierce Conversation. So I'm going to dissect what these books do. Fierce Conversations. One is, it says, be courageous and check the facts. One is just make sure that we're in agreement over what is important. Okay? If you don't have a conversation with what the other party knows to be important or what to them is factual, then you can be completely negotiating 2 different. You can be on the same purchase and sell agreement, but negotiating different different solutions. Okay. Always be authentic. Okay. To live in this moment now, listen and speak to this person, speak now, which means don't be distracted. It's so critical in negotiations that you are paying absolute attention to the other individual, because there's going to be clues, there's going to be something as to what's important to them, and you need to pay attention. Okay? Face your problems today, solve them, and move on. It's critical also that you understand what the biggest challenges that are in your life or in your relationships and your negotiations, and you do not procrastinate in resolving them. We all understand compound interest. By the way, problems compound interest. And if you're not facing them and at least acknowledging them and coming up with solutions and having a plan, your lack of decision making is still a decision, and regretfully, life will make them for you, and it's rarely what you would have gone with. Okay. Also, trust your gut and trust your instinct. Obey your intuition. Okay. I will tell you that in my experience, women are magnificent at instinct. In fact, what I've discovered in this maybe it's not always true, but I will tell you that husband wives or a good relationship where they work together towards a business goal do tremendously well, because they just bring skill sets. And it's amazing that mothering instinct that women have about people. I can't tell you how many times, I've seen in my career that a female client has had a funny sense about somebody. I'm like, what do you mean? You wouldn't rent to that person? No, what do you, they got money? They see, they're like, nah, something's off. And they're usually right on. It's scary, but oftentimes you may have that. Just go with your gut, obey your intuition. Okay. Remember that your conversations are the relationships. Take responsibility. Nothing you say is trivial, which means be really careful. And this is something I struggle with being sarcastic or being too humorous, right? That doesn't always go over well. So always just take responsibility and just understand that when you're negotiating something, nothing you say is trivial. And then finally, just shut up and let the silence do its necessary work. That is, after you ask a question, just shut up. This allows the other person to think of it. Oftentimes in our own minds, okay, our conversations first begin with ourselves and occasionally include other people. And that silence can be intimidating to you, but it is critical for the other person for them to think clearly without the distraction of your voice. If you want an authentic answer and you want one that's rooted in good thought and not just an ambiguous agreement that is not really a buy-in, it's just an answer in order to get you shut up and go away, then you have to be quiet after you ask your questions. And after that silence sets and they give you an answer, repeat the last 3 words. That shows that you're paying attention, and also gets them to say more. That's actually a strategy from Never Split the Difference. So an example would be, so let me ask you, why are you selling this house? And maybe the seller says, well, you know what, I really want to be in Arizona. And you say, oh, Arizona. Yeah, it's warm down there and I'm taking a job. Like that, you just report, oh, Arizona, huh? You want to move to Arizona. And then you ask it like a question and get real quiet. And then they'll feel obligated to fill in that silence. And that's how you get back later. So there's different things and different strategies you can use to let silence do its heavy lifting. Okay. Never Split the Difference talks about these. They talk about preparing, when you first do negotiations, they talk about preparing 3 to 5 negative and positive labels and collaborated questions. Okay, so what are 3 to 5 negative? Oh, by the way, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to share something with you. If you want to, this is really great. If you just put Never Split the Difference PDF, his whole strategic, let me find it. I downloaded it a long time ago, and I looked at it earlier the other day. Education. I put it under education file. There it is. All right, here we go. Check this out. All right, and we're going to share screen again. So you can look at it. It says pair to 5 negative positive labels. You're going to build rapport. It's tactical empathy is what he calls it. Let me just go through this and I'll show you the sheet real quick. Let me switch back to my share screen. It's a ham sandwich. I know what I do with my little icon. Go share screen. Okay, we're just gonna finish up on this slide, then I'm gonna show you this little handout, okay? Build rapport, tactical empathy, look for that's right. Don't get them to just say yes. Get them to say, you know what, that's right. You want an emphatic agreement, okay, to where that they bonded with you, because then they understand that you understand them. Get ahead of negative perceptions. Put yourself in a position to verbalize what other side deems to be true. Don't put words in their mouth. And what he means by this is he means, so what I understand that you're saying, so, and then repeat what they say. So if I'm hearing you correctly, what's important to you is this, okay? And it's important, and if he says, well, that's right, yeah, that's exactly right. You go, okay, you know what, excellent. Again, it's going back to verbalizing, understanding what's important, and don't ever put words in their mouth and go, well, you said this. No. Don't ever say that. Well, you said this. Dude, that's accusatory. Remember, we're staying curious. So what I understood that you wanted was X, and that's what I heard. Is that not accurate? Or, come from curiosity and make sure you pose questions in a form of curiosity, not in judgment, because then they'll get very, very defensive. Don't try to close quickly. Just be patient. Build a relationship. Get them to say that's right. It's emotional buy-in. And then plan for what ifs. And that is handle the big things. You go, okay, let's just talk about what the worst thing is that can go wrong. And allow them to say no. And then learn the difference between value and price. We talked about this in the beginning. And then close with implementation. It's so critical in negotiations when I say this close and implementation. Okay, is that you end every conversation with what happens next. Too many people just assume they're both participating in a conversation. Little did you know, they both had completely different conversations, even though they were both there. They both go their way with different ideas of what needs to happen next. Should always close every conversation you have with your client or with whoever it is you're negotiating with. Okay, here's what's going to happen next. I'm going to go do this and come back to you with this information. And can you go do this and come back with that information, and we'll get together within 48 hours. Does that seem reasonable? Excellent. Always end on what happens next. And it's so critical and it's so overlooked. That's really critical in your business with your clients, because I want you to imagine that your clients are like and this doesn't matter what business you're in. Even your boss is this way. Anybody that's in your life. I'm going to digress just a second. Where does all anger come from? Where does frustration come from?
Fear.
Fear. Kind of, yes, in a way. I heard it told me once, and I always stuck in, that anger and frustration comes from a failure of a set of circumstances to meet your preconceived outcome. That means that I understand that there's a standard and I expect other people to live by that standard. And when they don't, I get upset. And the more emotionally involved I am in that, the greater upset I get. I'm driving down the road. We all read the same driver's book. We all understand you're supposed to use a blinker. But if I'm my lane following my business and you suddenly swerve into my lane where I've been driving and you don't use your blinker, I get very upset. There's a standard that's been crossed here. We're not cave people. Use your freaking blinker, people. And so then you get frustrated. We get angry. But if you ever drive in Austin, Texas on the highway, they rarely use their blinkers. They haul ass. They cut people off all the time. That's just the standard. That's what they live in. So then what happens is that we have standards. And that is, if your husband, your wife, your loved one, your child, someone who's important to you says, hey, I'm going to be home at 9 p.m. and I'll see you then. And at 9:30, you haven't heard from them. Do you assume that they're out saving orphans from a bus or buying you flowers? No, you assume something's wrong. We immediately go to, hey, there was a standard. We agreed by this. This was my expectation of what happened. And when they don't hear from you and don't know what's going on, they don't assume everything's wrong. 99% of the time, because we do more to avoid pain, their mind goes to pain and they're thinking something's wrong and they're just not talking to me about it. That's why the most important conversation you can have with your clients is the ones where there's nothing going on. I call them follow-up Fridays, where you just call people and just say, hey, what's going on? You know what? Everything's going great, but I just thought I'd make sure that I wasn't dropping the ball on anything that's important to you. Here's where we're at. Here's what we need to do to go. Here's where we're going forward. And this is what happens next. Any questions or concerns? And that's critical because then they know what's next. But a lot of us don't have that conversation. We don't end conversations with what's happening next. We just assume they know, but we haven't actually said, here's what's going to happen next. And here's where you're going to hear from me. And therefore it's ambiguous. And don't be surprised if they get mad because you didn't lay it out. They had a different conversation. They understood. Hey, listen, they just, whatever reason got into their head. They created their own reality. And when your standards and their standards didn't meet, they're going to be pissed off. That's your fault, by the way. Okay. So different ways of handling standards. Okay. Let me show you this last thing. Any questions on any of these books? Anything? Has anybody read any of these?
Yeah, I have the second book, Never Split the Difference.
Excellent. What did you did you read it or did you do the Audible book?
I did the Audible book. I've actually listened to it several times.
It's pretty cool, isn't it?
It is. It definitely digs deep into your mind.
He's got some crazy stories about how he got them to spill up like they had a bank robbers. They were in a bank and they were negotiating a hostage situation and just building rapport and stuff like, why are you doing this? And what's going on with the money? And the guy gave up the fact that there was a guy outside the bank, a driver. Like, well, like there's 5 of us. They're like, wait, we only know of 4. So there's a 5th one somewhere. So just by building rapport with people, they gave up stuff that, was supposed to be secret. But so there's some great stuff. So one thing I want to show you that you can download, you just put Never Split the Difference PDF. I find this one is really, really interesting. I'm gonna share screens with you here. Boom. And you guys on a phone or something, you can't see this. It might be really small. I'm gonna blow this up. It is a 6-page summary sheet. So here's the goal. People want to be understood and be accepted, okay? You need to create a situation where they feel safe and they're in control. Make sure that you listen intensely, demonstrate empathy. Next, and once you understand the goal, you need to prepare. And he goes through here step by step. How does your tone need to be? Think of these things. Here's what your mirror, this is what you're looking for. What is the mirror price process? And basically it's the whole book and his whole strategy that the FBI uses in order to gain rapport with individuals and negotiate on 6 pages. Okay? So how to make sure that there's uses of being fair, right? How to find anchors, loss aversion, calibrated questions. Use phrases like, well, what makes you ask? What about X is important to you? How can I help make you this better for us? How would you like me to proceed? Okay, well, that's a great question. You have a seller, well, I want to bring, but how would you like me to proceed with this? Right, well, you know what? I'm not sure I like it. Why don't you go ahead and write it up anyway so I can look at it? All right, excellent, thank you. So this is just a 6-page summary sheet. And I would encourage you guys, if you really like if you read the book and then kind of delve in that summary sheet, it's really, really interesting. Okay, well, we only got 5 minutes left. I will tell you, and I want to end with this, and I want to end with a 4-step process that when you're meeting with a client and you're meeting with someone and you really want to find out, and maybe what's best for them, but you can't just tell it. You can't ever tell anybody just what to do. You should do this, right? Remember that we are a coach. In real estate, whether it's with our clients or whether we're trying to negotiate with somebody to try to get, try to find like a seller finance deal or something, it's so critical that we ask effective questions about about what's important to them. So what I'm going to do is here's what I want you. If you guys got a pen, this is really powerful. What I do is I take a piece of notebook paper like this, and I carve it into 4 different columns. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And the first question is, remember what we said? Remember, everybody, when they're looking to make a decision, they're just looking to do 2 things. That is avoid pain and experience pleasure, right? So now this is an exercise that you can do with a client, particularly somebody who doesn't want to price, like as real estate licensee, one of the biggest ones we have is sellers who are not realistic with their price, okay? It's a real challenge when they're firm that they think they know what their house is worth because they've been on Zillow, right? Thank you. Okay, so what happens is we got to walk them through the scenario. The first thing that you would say is, or we don't even have to be a price. It could be something like going to the gym. Jeremiah works out all the time. I'm proud of him. I see his meal prep Sundays. He makes me feel ashamed that I don't meal prep, right? I bet you haven't been doing that lately, though. You've been out at the cabin. It's hard to meal prep at the cabin. But if you were trying to get emotional leverage on yourself to maybe exercise or save money or whatever it is, whatever decision-making process, this is how you go about it. The first question that you ask is, what is the pleasure of your current situation? What is the pleasure you're getting, or what is the benefit of asking $50,000 more for your property than I think it's worth, right? Oh, well, I'm going to have more money. I'm going to do this. Maybe it's not going to the gym. What is the pleasure? Well, then I get to relax. You know, I can Netflix and binge. I get to do all these things. What is the pleasure involved with it? Okay. What is the pain? And then you do the pain, the opposite. What is the pain associated with taking action and going to the gym, or the pain associated with saving money? So one, we got to recognize that when someone doesn't want to change their ways, it's because they're experiencing some sort of pleasure in where they're at and some sort of pain with where they see themselves being. And that is their reality. And that's where they're choosing to exist. And you can't tell them what to do because it doesn't register. So first, what is the pleasure you're getting out of your certain circumstance? What is the pain associated with taking action and changing? Now there's two more questions. One is, what would be the pleasure that your life, and how would your life change if you were to take this action and do it? Now they're thinking of future self, and they're thinking themselves in the future, like, oh, okay. So one is we analyze the present. Now we're moving into future. And he goes, okay, well, if I started working out, I'd feel better. I'd have more energy. You know, maybe I'd feel better about going to Hawaii and planning a vacation trip. My knees wouldn't hurt so bad when I climb the stairs. I don't know, whatever that is. And they put in that, all those things. And then the final one is, what is the pain you will experience if you never change and you fail? And then they start going to future failure. And that is, gosh, I don't live as long. I don't go on vacations. I don't have all that stuff. And it's an interesting process of 4 steps. Now you can analyze anything. With a seller, it's, if you had somebody, what will you do if your house doesn't sell? If you do not price your house to sell, what will that do to your life if it doesn't sell? What will that do for your wife? How will your wife look at it, and how will you feel if your house is on the market for 180 days and it doesn't sell and everybody else's around you does? What will happen if you can't get to Arizona and it doesn't happen this year and you have to put off your dreams another year or maybe 2 years? So again, it's this exercise. When you guys walk somebody through that exercise, you don't have to tell them what to do. You may discover at the end of it that the answer isn't what you thought it would be, but I will tell you what, it will be a very real answer. And you'll know exactly what is that client's motivation. When you are working with a seller or you're trying to negotiate on somebody's, or trying to figure out, this is a fantastic exercise. What do you love about this house, and is there any reason you would stay? What is the pain with selling it? Is there anything that's a frustration for you? Hey, once you sell this property, what is that going to do for you? And how is that going to make your life better? And what are all the great things that can happen? And if it doesn't sell because you don't take action, what kind of pain does that create? Dude, it's so critical that people first analyze their present self and go to future self. And if you ever have a chance to do that, even with your kids, like, what happens if you don't do your homework, and what does that look like? You just have them self-analyze, because very few people do that. You'd be really amazed, because that's the kind of motivation you want. That's the kind that sticks with them because it comes from within. It's not externally forced. All right, guys, what do we got here? Is the summary sheet in the book. Would you mind sharing yours? Tammy Thiel, the summary sheet for Never Split the Difference. If you just Google Never Split the Difference PDF, it's going to show up. It's a free download. You don't have to buy the book. You can get the summary sheet. But the summary sheet is lost if you don't read the book and see them how they apply. Okay, so you really want to see how it applies. If you find yourself in one of those positions where you're having lots of, I don't know, where you find yourself in a job where you got to act like a counselor or something, the Fierce Conversations is great. There is a couple steps in there as far as they tell you how to write letters. Like if you have an issue that needs to be addressed with a client or a loved one, a very specific way on how to write that letter to seek resolution. And there's a bunch of templates in this book for conflict resolution that are phenomenal. A big part of it being that you're acknowledging your fingerprints in this and you take ownership for what you're responsible for, and you come from a point of contribution. And how do you articulate that? Anyway, guys, hey, it's 8 o'clock. Rex is up. Real quick, anybody want to share any ahas? What did you learn today?
I've heard you talk about pain and pleasure before, and it was good to hear that again, because that's just so important to just not overcomplicate things and just know that that's the key to any good negotiation. And stay level-headed, don't get emotional, and be good.
I appreciate that, Jeremiah. You're absolutely right. So the problem is that my pain is not your pain. It's not fair for me to try to take my situation and infer it on you. It's your reality, and we have a responsibility to understand their position. What else? Does anybody else want to share something that they learned?
I like the approach of being their problem solver and being their coach through it.
Excellent. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, guys. Well, if that's it, I'm going to let you guys go. If you have questions about the books or anything, is anything else I can do for you? I always got your back. And if you have anything, I think if you guys have a great topic for the next Rex meeting, I believe that that we can start meeting in public now. I just got an email either the week or the week before. However, I don't know, we may just end up going permanently to like an online. I think it's better that we can, it's a little more convenient, not have to drive around. We're not away from our families as much. So
Coming from Wasilla, it sure is nice.
yeah, and then all the Wasilians can join without having to drive into Anchorage. Excellent. All right, guys. Well, I appreciate y'all greatly. Thanks for coming to a Rex meeting, and I'll catch you next month.
Excellent class, John. Thanks.
Peace out.
Bye.